Carol, we are told there's going to be a recession. We're already in a recession. There's not going to be a recession. There's going to be a depression. I'm the one saying that. Where are we, Carol? What's coming?
So there's sort of the base case scenario, and then there's the possible case scenario. So I'll start, since we're both such, kind of big optimists, you and I, we've been putting forth this happy news. I'll start with the base case scenario. The base case scenario is things aren't going to be great. Whether you call it a recession or you call it stagflation, we're going to be in a prolonged period of financial pain for the average consumer. Whether it is the spiraling costs that continue while the economy sputters along, that stagflation, or whether they use the Fed, quote unquote, tools to slow the economy down, to cool off the economy, which means that they have cooled it to the point that consumer spending, is low enough that puts us into a recession. Then you get sort of all the recessionary issues that come out of it. That takes us, 18 months, 24 months to work through in a typical cycle, and a lot of pain for the average American. You have to draw down your savings, you're putting stuff on your credit cards, and you are basically bailing out the people who created this mess to begin with. So that's the good news, Jesse. Do you want to hear the bad news?
I would love to hear the bad news. Please, Carol, continue.
So there are what I call sort of the three gray swan scenarios. And I call them gray swans because obviously they're not black swans, because I can predict them, although the government reaction to them can become a black swan, as we saw with COVID. So the three gray swan scenarios are that we have massive energy rationing. We are already preparing for some rolling blackouts here in the US and in Europe. And if that kind of ends up on the bigger side of what we thought it was, that could create massive issues for people. Mass starvation. Again, we know that there is food insecurity going on right now in places around the world, but it could be that tens to hundreds of millions of people end up with mass starvation, based in part by some of the ridiculous decisions that have been made over the past couple of years. And the social unrest that comes with those first two scenarios could lead us to, full-scale global war, in which case, all of these sort of predictions that we're making are all at the table, and it becomes this outside scenario. As I said, that's the possibility, not the probability, but it's important for us to be prepared and thinking about any scenario, especially with the wonderful leadership that we have in charge. Because, if there is going to be a crisis, the group of adults that we have in charge of us right now, Jesse, those are exactly the people I was hoping would be leading us the way out of this crisis.
Yeah, of course. All right, Carol, you mentioned earlier a prolonged period, and then you talked about 18, 24 months. Is that something? I realize people don't want to, don't take that to the bank. You never know what the future is going to be. I'm asking you to have a crystal ball here, but how long are we going to wake up every morning and roll over and look at our phone and say, crap?
Yeah, until there's some major structural shift, because the reality is there's only one thing right now that is going to get us out of inflation, and that is a 180-degree turn on energy policy from the Biden administration. And I'm not a betting woman, Jesse. You don't find me in Vegas very often. But if I was, I'd be taking my life savings, taking it to Vegas and betting that he is not going to do a 180 on energy policy. And so since he's not willing to step into that difficult role that leaders find themselves in and make a tough decision, I don't see any other route for us coming out the other end without some level of carnage. It's just a question of the degree of carnage. And that just goes to the level of stupidity they have. The Democrats are so disconnected from reality. There could be a situation where they go, people are hurting. We should send them more cash, which, as we know, putting more cash into a supply-constrained economy will just further inflation. But that's what got us into this mess to begin with. They don't seem to have a lot of connection to reality in any policy. So, putting a crystal ball on what insane people are going to do is very challenging.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, Che Guevara, the latest episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.